These days we get used to grim stories from the motor industry. However, there is one sector that remains buoyant and indeed is expanding, and that's MPVs, multi-purpose vehicles or people carriers. Back in 1982, Mitsubishi introduced their first model, and they've shown incredible foresight because they've now got two models in their range. They've got the Space Runner and this vehicle, the Space Wagon, and they really are ideal for taking the whole family. I hope you realise they're not my family. Tracy, be quiet.
Come on, Dad, take us to the Motorfair.
Now, who's got the money for the parking meter?
No, not me.
Typical. The Mitsubishi Space Wagon is just one of 40 models new to the UK that you can see this year at Motorfair 91. Welcome to Motorfair 91, the largest motor show that's ever been held in London, thanks to this huge new exhibition hall 2, which was opened earlier in the week by Princess Diana. Now, of course, Motorfair really has got something for everybody. Upstairs, there's a car for which they want £500,000. And if you've got £1,700, you might like to buy this pedal car for your kids. And of course, the major thing about Motorfair is that you can actually go onto any of the stands and purchase a car. Let's join Chris Goffey, who's with Ford's.
Thanks, Noel. I love those wheels. Well, Ford had the joint biggest stand here at Motorfair, and there's some very big news on it. The world launch of their RS 2000. Now, this is a car that's really going to appeal to the enthusiast. Under the bonnet is a 150 brake horsepower, twin overhead cam, fuel-injected 16-valve unit, derived from the Sierra 2-litre engine. It drives through a new 5-speed gearbox. Now, that's enough to give it 130 mile/hour top speed and 0 to 60 around 8 seconds. Road holding is excellent, as you'd expect. A very sophisticated braking system, 4-wheel discs and anti-lock. And when you hear that Jackie Stewart had quite a hand in the development of the car, it explains a great deal.
Well, Chris, here's another significant car on the stand, the long-awaited Granada Estate. Sadly missed since the old model went out of production back in 1985. At long last, Ford have realised just how popular the old model was, and have come up with this very happy-looking new version. It'll be competing against the rather steady Volvo 7 Series Estate, and we think it's going to make a lot of friends and take a large slab of the fiercely fought estate car market. But if you think this is going to be big enough for your lot, you'll have to wait for the spring for this one. And with such a vast 77 cubic foot load space, we don't think it's going to be hanging around the showrooms for very long.
Ford's deadliest rivals in the UK are, of course, Vauxhall, for whom the Astra has been a best-selling small car for many years now. So the announcement of the new Vauxhall lineup is bound to be big news. What do you think of it? Well, reactions are mixed. Some people say it's not quite so familiar as the teardrop shape with which we've all become accustomed. The body's a lot stiffer. They say it's around 200 pounds heavier than the old model, and that's made up mainly by heavier gauge steel and a new front end that absorbs collisions much better. There are 5 engine options and ABS is available on the swifter models, but what about the inside? Well, it's certainly a lot lighter and it seems to be more airy. There was criticism that the Astra was rather claustrophobic, particularly if you sat in the back. But the boy racers are no doubt going to want to know about the GSI, the follow-up to the GTE. It's got the same 150 brake horsepower engine, but the companies say that it's now a lot more sophisticated. The ride is just that little bit softer. Rather a refined motor car these days. In a moment, we're going to be looking at the historic racers and some of the classic cars that are here at Motorfair. We've also got our competition involving the Williams Formula One team. I'll be talking to Tracy Childs about what a woman wants in a car.
I know what I need. I need a man to help me with this. Thank you very much.
Oh, right.
Terrific, thanks. Now, this is the Calibra Turbo. Perhaps you'd like a few details of it. 152 miles an hour. 200 brake horsepower and a 6-speed gearbox.
Four-wheel drive?
Well, of course, and there's lots more to see in the Vauxhall stand. See you later.
Okay.
This is Vauxhall's first pitch for a slice of the ever-growing off-road vehicle market. This is the Frontiera. It comes in a 3- and a 5-door form with a choice of 2 petrol or a turbo diesel engine. The Frontiera, there's no doubt about it, is going to prove a serious competitor to the popular Land Rover Discovery. Finished in fashionable colours with upmarket saloon car comforts, Vauxhall have produced an exciting range of new leisure vehicles with some rather clever features, like this rear door arrangement in the 5-door model, which opens in 3 different ways.
Toyota have chosen Motorfair to launch their new executive challenger, the Camry. Now, earlier this month, I had the chance to road test the car. The Camry range comes in just 2 engine sizes in the UK. This is the 3-litre V6 24-valve unit, the GX. There's also a 2.2-litre GL model with a 16-valve engine. Now, both cars feature sophisticated engine management systems. Inside, it's trimmed in the Japanese idea of tasteful refinement. That means light grey up here and medium grey everywhere else. Even the leather seats look like a smooth plastic. You'd never know a cow had them on its back at one stage. Lots of knobs and whistles to play with, sophisticated sound system, air conditioning, power everything except for the seats, which are manually adjusted, and these knobs are a bit stiff to turn. The car steers, corners and handles well. There's a bit more body roll than you might have expected. Braking is exceptional with big 15-inch ventilated discs and a sophisticated anti-lock system. One minus point though, at night the headlamps simply aren't up to the rest of the car's performance. But the main reason why the Europeans should be particularly worried about this car is its price. This V6 with all the equipment I've talked about will sell for £22,350. Now, there's a lot of executive cars in that price bracket, but in almost every case, you have to spend a fortune on a string of optional extras to match the Camry specification. That's not just competitive pricing, it's aggressive. This is Toyota's top-of-the-line luxury model, the Lexus, currently decimating Jaguar, BMW and Mercedes sales in the States. Now, the Japanese engineers drew heavily on their experience of building Lexus in the design of the Camry. And that's why it poses such a threat on the European executive market to cars like Volvo's 940, BMW's 525i and Rover's 827. Of course, the Japanese are changing the face of car manufacturing in Britain. The Primera, produced by the Nissan factory on Tyneside, is one of the most underrated cars in Britain, largely due to the current dispute over UK distribution. In Derbyshire, the vast Toyota factory will be churning out 100,000 Camrys a year by 1992. And in Swindon, the Honda factory, currently producing engines, will soon be making joint models with Rover. Now, obviously, the cars they manufacture here won't be subject to the import quotas imposed on Japanese models. They'll be treated as British cars. We're going to see an awful lot more of them around on our roads. No matter what the French say about Trojan horses, there's little doubt that many are going to be imported to Europe, especially from 1992 onwards.
In view of developments between Rover and Honda, it's rather ironic that Rover don't actually have a stand here at Motorfair. Officially, the companies say that they're cost-cutting, but I think a lot of people feel that the decision is regrettable. And, of course, BMW and Daihatsu have also pulled out of Motorfair. If you want to see a Range Rover, there's one on the Turbo Technics stand. The company make all sorts of modifications to it. By the time they're finished with the Vogue model, it delivers almost 260 brake horsepower, enough to power it from 0 to 60 in about 8 seconds. And then there's this. This is the Bullet Range Rover. It's got a petrol engine, runs on unleaded, independent suspension. It's got a 5-speed transmission and a disc brake. And if the kids are already going, I want one, I want one, I want one, you've got the perfect opt-out. It costs nearly £4,500. One company that has certainly made a very firm commitment to Motorfair is Peugeot. It's a very lavish stand, Paul. As the stand manager, sell me a car.
Okay, Noel, well, this is the Peugeot 106. It's the new car, new small car from Peugeot. First thing I'd say is about the styling, very distinctive Peugeot lines. And then the next thing is the interior space, which in a small car like this is extremely large interior space for a car of this size. Tweed cloth seats matching the insert there, and the carpet's a colour key to the body colour of your choice.
Oh, I'm not sure about the door handle, but carry on.
Styled rear lights and interior rear boot space of that size, very competitive in a car of this sort, and a low sill height, so that's useful when you're going shopping and lifting heavy loads in. And the driving position, well, perhaps you'd like to try the driving position.
And the door handle again. Right. Now, that's an interesting point. The radio and tape player built into the dash.
Yeah, it's a security item for us. It's integrated into the dash so that if anybody steals it, they can't use it in any other car bar a 106. It's a 3-door petrol hatchback. It's got 3 engine sizes, 1 litre the base model, 1.1, and we go right the way up to the Sporty XSI 1.4.
And the price starts at?
6195. Sounds as if you're sold.
It's a deal. Paul, thank you very much. So we've seen the pretty bits, but what goes on underneath? What goes on up front? Let's meet a man who spends all his time crawling all over cars. Maurice, the reason I've asked you to come to Motorfair is I want a mechanic's eye view of the modern car. How easy, for example, is the Peugeot 106 to work on?
Well, no, looking at it, a very nice layout, very easy for the owner to look at the obvious things, and for a mechanic, I would say very, very simple. And the thing that impressed me for us, for the Ministry of Transport, is the chassis number. Very, very obvious.
Right.
And what really pleases me is you get a chip on the glass, change it 15 quid instead of 50, 60 pounds.
Good.
Very good.
Excellent.
I took the long way around to Motorfair. This very racy ragtop is the first convertible made by Renault since the 50s, and who can blame me for running off with it? It won't be available here until the spring. You can choose between 2 types, the standard 1.8 or the faster 16-valve version. The car's good looks are helped by the roll bar here around the front screen, and the hood, which folds completely flat at the back, not spoiling the car's lines. And it doesn't look bad with the hood up either. And I reckon at between £15,000 to £16,000, it's not too expensive. This is the Clio 16-valve, Renault's latest hot hatchback. It's the first to be fitted with these new wings, made from a special flexible plastic, which absorbs the average 10-mile-an-hour bump and then returns to its original shape. But inside, there's another new development. As a desirable high-performance car with a top speed of 130 miles an hour, sadly, it's an ideal target for car thieves. So, Renault's answer? Well, a brand new anti-theft device which completely immobilizes the car. It's hidden in here somewhere, but no 2 cars are the same.
Skoda is a company fast leaving all those jokes way behind and now owned by the vast Volkswagen empire, and this is the first showing for their Favorite-based pickup truck. Of course, Volkswagen also owns Seat, and their Toledo is on show at Motorfair for the first time with Volkswagen engines in 1.6, 1.8 and 2-litre form. Built in Barcelona, the company says prices will be keen. This is the car a lot of people will be coming to Motorfair to see. It's the new Volkswagen Golf. Very much a last-minute decision to show it here, but this is the version a lot of people will be interested in, the VR6. It's fitted with a very narrow angle 2.8-litre V6 engine. How have they crammed such a lot of litres under the Golf bonnet? Well, the answer is in the narrow angle of the V. There's only one cylinder head, and yet the engine is no longer than a conventional 4. Now, the result is a very smooth and powerful little car that's very different in character to the Volkswagen Golf GTI. In fact, the company says it creates a new class of car that's going to wean executives out of their big fat Audis.
Star of the Honda stand is the new Civic. It won't be on sale until November, but as you can see, it's longer, wider and higher than the old car. In fact, it really moves the Civic out of the small car class. It comes as a 3-door hatchback, which I'm driving, or as a 4-door saloon. Fuel-injected 16-valve engines with catalysts are standard across the range. There's also the option of an airbag on the top-line model. Industry engineers are particularly interested in the revolutionary V-Tech engine in one of the models. It features electronic rather than mechanical control of the valves, and that means the car can return the economy of a diesel with the performance of a petrol engine, and the emission levels are very low indeed. A pointer to the future for all our cars. Also new to the UK is the Audi 80. It's got a restyled rear end, answering criticism about the very small boot on the old car, particularly in the Quattro version. Now the rear seats fold forward. As you can see, there's a huge boot area, big enough to take this brochure that tells you about the completely baffling range of engines and options that you get in the Audi 100 range. There's a 4-cylinder, there's a 5-cylinder turbo and V6 front-wheel drive and 4-wheel drive. There's automatic 5- and 6-speed gearboxes. And prices that go from £18,000 to £34,000. I don't know who I feel more sorry for, the salesman who's got to explain that lot, or the poor chap in the parts department that's got to keep all the models on the road. Anyway, weighing in at a mighty 33,000 behind me, it's new to the UK, the Audi 100 estate car. And this has got some very strong selling points for both the performance driver and the environmentalist. 230 horsepower engine, a 6-speed manual gearbox, of course got the Quattro 4-wheel drive system, and ABS is standard. Indeed, ABS is standard on all models in the Audi range. Other manufacturers note. For the environmentalist, there's good news that 80% of the components that go into the Audi 100 are made from recycled material. So this car behind me has had a previous life somewhere else.
Well, it's not just the Germans who are into recycling. Citroën have a test plant currently recycling 100% of old cars, and they paid particular attention to recycling in this, their latest model, the XM Estate. That's the V6, but this, the 2-litre injection, is likely to be the volume seller of the range. This, of course, is the latest in a long line of Citroën estates going back to the CX and the DS before it. Very low loading platform always, and with the hydropneumatic suspension, you can drop the whole car even lower if you've got a very heavy load to get into the back. Once it's in, the car stays level when you're driving along, even with 2/3 of a ton in the back. The estate body is 10 inches longer and about 3.5 inches higher than the saloon. That makes for a lot more load area, but you've lost the 3rd row of seats they used to have if you wanted to carry 7 passengers. That market's gone to the people carriers, but there's still plenty of room in here to stretch out if your feet are getting as tired as mine are walking around this show. Oh, that's better. Citroën launched their ZX range on the market 3 months ago, but this is the first showing for the diesel version of the ZX. This is the 1.9-litre naturally aspirated unit, very familiar. It's in the BX and in other Peugeot models, and one suspects their excellent turbo diesel will be coming along in the future. Of course, diesel is the fastest growing sector of the market at the moment, and the fleets are becoming very interested in it. The company tips the ZX to do very well there. This is the top of the recently facelifted AX range, the AX GTI. 100 brake horsepower, maximum speed of 118 miles an hour, and 0 to 60 in under 9 seconds. This is precisely the sort of car that the insurance industry is getting so worried about, and insurance premiums But this and others like it are going to go up substantially in the very near future.
Citroën have always been ahead of their time. This is the Traction Avant, which had front-wheel drive 25 years before the Mini. Just one of a large selection of French classics up here in the gallery. You've got to admit it, when it comes to style, the French always have the final word.
I'm having so much fun driving this car that I make absolutely no apologies for the gear changes or the cliche that it belongs to the golden age of motoring, because the Lagonda M45 Tourer comes from a time when motoring really was fun, and the fun started with your decision that you were going to have a Lagonda chassis and then you were going to have your own body built on it. In the case of this car, back in 1934, a photographer went to Van den Pla and specified a car with these sculpted doors, making it look very sleek, and it's got a special boot on the back, extra large for his photographic equipment. It really is a magnificent monster. There's loads of power, 4.5-litre engine. It's a 6-cylinder engine, and in its day the Lagonda really was the He-Man sports tourer, and it soon found favour with the wealthy sporting types of the 1930s. And I have to say, it doesn't half appeal to me. I can't wait to find out what Brooks are going to get for this at auction. In fact, we're going to have to wait until next Thursday to find out whether Brooks' auction this year exceeds the record figures it achieved at the last Motorfair. Brooks' business last time was worth in excess of £7 million. They've got 50 cars in the auction, and if you want to get stuck in and have a bit of a play, what about a trio of Bentleys? This 3-litre open tourer is likely to go for about £60,000. Although I've just heard from Robert Brooks himself that the real snip of the auction could well be this Aston Martin 2-litre team car, 4 times at Le Mans, Mille Miglia and the 24 Hours of Spa. It's been in the same owner's hands for the last 40 years, and it's not expected to even make 6 figures. But of course the car that I shall be watching with a keen eye is my Lagonda. They reckon it could go for £60,000, as long as nobody finds out I've been crashing the gearbox around.
2 years ago, the hysteria over the investment potential of classic cars was at its peak. The values of cars like this Aston Martin were doubling in a year, and clearly the bubble had to burst. Well, that's now happened with a vengeance, and prices of Jaguars and Jensens have tumbled. Even this 1929 Speed 6 Bentley has dropped from £600,000 to a mere £350,000 if you've got the cash. Of course, the true enthusiast was unaffected by all this hype. He just kept on driving his car, enjoying it and delighting in the destruction of the speculators. Now, over those past 2 years, a lot of people have spent a fortune on restoration in the hope of doubling their money. They're now desperate to get some of that money back. There's some real bargains around, and there's some very good companies now making parts to keep these sort of cars on the road. So there's never been a better time to buy.
You're simply the best. Better than all the rest. Better than anyone. Anyone I've ever met. Knock down your heart. I hang on every word you say. Tear us apart. Baby, I would rather be dead.
Yes, and the starter certainly held the cars on the red a long time as Mansell makes a dive inside centre, and he's taking the lead.
The investment the Williams-Renault Formula One team has put into Nigel Mansell is certainly paying dividends this season, and in front of his home crowd at Silverstone this year, he drove quite brilliantly. But behind the able hands of Mansell lies a huge backup team of dedicated mechanics who operate as a highly skilled piece of machinery. The Williams Grand Prix engineering outfit is based here at Didcot. Their conference centre and museum contains one of the largest historical collections of Formula One racing cars in the UK. It may come as a surprise to realise that it takes around 180 staff at Williams to support just 2 Formula One racing cars, which take part in 16 races a year. Some of them have downed tools to have a bit of fun and see just how many can squeeze into the new Renault Espace.
Put your knees right out back like that.
Yeah. I've got to get in the top corner here.
Well, if you wonder what that was all about, we're running a competition, and all the proceeds are going to this year's BBC's Children in Need appeal. The questions are very simple, and if you've got the correct answer, you could be going to next year's British Grand Prix as a guest of Renault. All we want to know is how many of the Williams personnel actually crammed into the people carrier, come up with that number, and who did Nigel Mansell drive for last year? If you're right and you're our winner, you could be on your way to the British Grand Prix. Give us a call on 0898 100 195. Calls cost 36p a minute and the lines are open until midnight tonight. We'll be announcing the results on next Thursday's Top Gear.
The 24-hour endurance race at Le Mans has fired the hearts of enthusiasts for generations. There's been nothing to touch it for sheer charisma and excitement. Now, to celebrate the epic race, there's a display of cars which have dominated Le Mans down the ages, surrounded here by the sleek shapes of the cars that have been taking part in recent years. This is the 1991 Spice car. But for my money, the cars that used to race at Le Mans were far more exotic and interesting. Let me show you what I mean on the other end of this stand. Now, when I was a schoolboy, cars like this factory team TR2 were competing, and what's more, coming 15th in the 1954 Le Mans race. But in fact, it was no different to the car you could buy and run on the roads. By 1962, the works Sunbeam Alpines were getting pretty specialised and were quite a long way away from the road cars. And yet, they were still instantly recognisable as proper sports cars. And for sheer raw brute power, the fearsome 1963 Cobra epitomised what sports car racing was all about. Now, don't forget, Tuesday is Motorsport Day here at the exhibition. Plenty of racing cars on the stands and their drivers to answer your questions and tell you how to get into motorsport.
For a bit of fun, we've got the Caterham Super 7, developed from the old Lotus 7, which was, and indeed still is, a much-loved cult car of the 60s. New from Caterham this year is the K-Series, powered by an all-British Rover 1.4 injection engine. And this natty little projectile is equally at home on the road or on the track. In fact, there's even a special Caterham Cars race series, which means that you can squeeze into your 7 and go shopping in the morning, and then in the afternoon have a quick blast around the circuit. Close by is Ginetta with their 150-mile-an-hour G33 V8 Roadster, one of the fastest British handmade sports cars. At a smidgen under £20,000, the G33 must have the highest money-to-performance ratio of any car in the show. But Ginetta aren't a new face at Earls Court. They've been making sports cars since 1954, winning laurels on racetracks all over the world, occasionally even showing a clean pair of exhaust pipes to the legendary AC Cobra. The Mini Marcos may not look like a competition car, but it was in fact the only British car to finish the gruelling 24-hour Le Mans race back in 1967. I think it's so good to see small cottage industry car manufacturers like Marcos flourishing among all these giant multinationals. Production on the car stopped back in 1974, but due to popular demand, it's being relaunched. And in fact, the Japanese have just ordered 100 cars. I have to say, this is one of my favourites. It's so cute, you just want to pick it up between finger and thumb and run it along the top of a table. But of all the cars in this range, the TVR has to be the success story of the year. The VHS went down a storm at the Geneva show, and in fact the response led to the development of the right-hand drive for the home market. Now, for me, there's only one major problem with the VHS, and that is that I have problems making decisions at the best of times. But with 12,000 exterior paint colours to choose from, never mind 50 interior trims, I've got my work cut out. It'll set you back a cool £23,595. So what you get for your money? Well, it's got that personalised feeling. It's handcrafted. Each car takes 3 weeks to build. That combination of power and speed, never mind the fact it's half the price of its German competitors, it's certainly a force to contend with. And a wonderful car to pose in.
In common with many British sports car enthusiasts, I almost wept with frustration when Mazda launched their MX-5 sports car. Why? Because it's exactly the car the MGB should have become had it been allowed to be developed. As it was, those boneheads at BL closed down the most loyal workforce they had, and they squandered the talents of the designers and engineers. The result, well, the Japanese have walked into the mass production sports car market that we walked away from and handed them on a plate. And of course, Mazda aren't just making the MX-5. They've recently introduced the MX-3, a range of cars they say will enter the hot hatchback market in the United Kingdom. It's a 2+2 coupe, though there's really not a lot of room in the back, and it's fitted with the world's smallest and lightest V6 engine, just 1.8 litres. Seems an awful lot of ironmongery. Wonder why they bother to make it so small, especially when Golf get an engine of the same size and the VR6 of 2.8 litres. The MX-6 has just been launched. That's got a 2 litre and 2.5 litre V6. So 3 new cars in 2 years. You do wonder sometimes if the British sports car industry shot itself in the foot.
Ford's RS2000 is certainly drawing the crowds, which proves that people are still fascinated by performance cars. Something like that could get you into an awful lot of trouble with my next guest, who comes from the Warwickshire Constabulary. David, the reason why I invited you to Motorfair is that I'm very interested in your professional view of the current breed of cars.
Yes, Noel, as a motorway officer, I obviously see all different types of cars on the motorway. The RS2000 that you've just been looking at is obviously a very striking car. It immediately grabs your attention. I'm more interested in a car that is safe rather than one that looks good. And in my opinion, that is the car that I would go for, a safe car.
Do you think the manufacturers are doing enough to sell the aspect of safety to the public?
No, I don't. I think they've got it completely the wrong way around. The car that has a higher range car has as standard ABS and power assisted steering and other safety aspects on it, whereas a more down-range car like this one we're sitting in hasn't. And in my opinion, they should have them as standard in these cars, and possibly if you wanted to buy a sunroof or a nice spoiler on the back, to pay extra for those. I think they should spend the money on safety first and the other cosmetic items last.
So really the manufacturers have got it completely the wrong way round?
Yes, that's right.
Some people will do anything to make an entrance, and who better to arrive at Volvo's stand than Chris Bonington, a man for whom safety is a way of life. This is the Volvo 850, the state-of-the-art in safety. Well, in fact, it's only half an 850, and here's why. There are a variety of features, starting with these chassis legs that stretch all the way along here down through to the floor pan. Then there are the reinforced sills and of course the door pillars. But what people are really talking about is the side impact protection system hidden underneath the seat. These strong black bars go underneath the seat, and the idea is that they absorb the shock of a side impact, therefore stopping the whole passenger compartment from caving in. Very significant when you think that statistics show that 20% of all accidents are in fact side impacts.
Saab have announced what they call the second generation of 9000s, and for a car that already has a reputation for being tough as old boots, they paid even more attention to safety. There's new cross beams under the floor, and as you can see in this exotic cutaway model with its orange-coloured additions. They put in new strengthened sills, new door pillars that tie into them, a new roof that ties into the door pillars, and a new rear end. The whole thing builds up to an absolutely impregnable safety cage. Now, as you'd expect, they feature anti-lock brakes as standard, but the car also has electronic traction control. That means if the system senses a front wheel is about to spin, it backs off the throttle, irrespective of where your accelerator foot is.
But it's not just in the executive class that safety is becoming important. As Noel showed us earlier, the Astra is the first car in its class to have front seat belt tensioners as standard. In fact, in impacts of over 12 miles an hour, the belt tightens automatically just when you need it. And Vauxhall reckon that it could reduce head and neck injuries by as much as 20%. Let's see how it works.
Possibly the safety story of Motorfair was the announcement by Hans Tauscher, the managing director of Mercedes-Benz, who of course are world famous for pioneering crumple zones and for their safety cell technology. Mercedes-Benz are to slash their charges for airbags by 50%. There are 11 cars in their range that now have airbags as standard, and if you want to take up the option, instead of paying £1,500 for a bag on the driver's side, it's now cut to £750. The reason for the reduction is twofold. Mercedes-Benz obviously recognise the economies of scale, but they also want to influence the public perception of airbags. Now, I reckon that at a time when a lot of us are having to come to terms with wearing seat belts in the rear of cars, the whole business of airbags can be rather confusing. What do? Airbags have actually been around a long time, and they've saved many hundreds of lives. In simple terms, a bank of sensors detects any impact above 12 miles an hour, either frontal or from the rear. And the bag is inflated and, most importantly, deflated in milliseconds. The brief period of full inflation is sufficient to cushion the driver and passenger against sustaining severe injury. On this, the flagship model, the 600 SEL, airbags are, of course, standard. And this car goes on sale in the UK later this month. In a depressed market, it's going to be very interesting to see how she performs. What am I talking about? The order book is full for the next 2 years. So who else is selling cars in 1991? Here's Alan Freeman.
And it's the Pick of the Pups top 10 cars for 1991. At number 10, it's family comfort with the stylish looks of the Peugeot 405. Up one at number 9, we've got the Nippy Nova from Vauxhall. Down at number 8, Peugeot 205, no longer the baby of the range. Rover Metro's at number 7, best small hatch and car of the year. And down at number 6, the superb quality 200 series from the Rover stable, right? Down at number 5, it's the Precious Air Vauxhall Astra. On the climb, up at number 4, the shape that shocked the world, the Ford Sierra. It's the top 3. And down at number 3, Vauxhall's Cavalier in the battle for the fleet market. Up at number 2 and waiting for number 1 is Ford's ever-popular Escort. And at number 1 in 1991, Ford again, and this time with the fun-loving Fiesta. You betcha. And there they are. That was the top 10 UK cars, 1991. All right? Not off.
So this is what the stylists at Lotus Engineering get up to when they let off the leash. Basically a Lotus Elan, but on the top of it they built this stylish, very aerodynamic body. This central bar is a bit of a barrier to traditional sports car activities, I think, but the car itself is no joke. The interior trim panels, the sophisticated stereo system, these lovely drilled racing pedals, even the floor mats could be incorporated in production cars if the public likes them. I think it's very reminiscent of the old Porsche Spider. I think if Lotus produced it tomorrow, it would sell like the proverbial hotcakes. Now, I think this is one of the most stunning cars at the show. Now, Alfa Romeo are billing it as a concept car, a mobile laboratory, but in fact, it's nothing of the sort. The Alfa engineers built this 155-mile-an-hour four-wheel drive, four-wheel steer Proteo with its unique self-stowing glass roof as a full production car that would have gone on sale. Trouble was, Alfa Romeo are owned by Fiat, who also own Ferrari, and in the event it was decided that this car poses too much of a technological threat to the Maranello machines. just goes to show the depths of the political internecine warfare that goes on in these huge industrial concerns.
For me, one of the most significant stories here at Motorfair is the announcement of a joint initiative by Ford and Motorola in support of the Lamplugh Trust. Diana Lamplugh set up the trust in memory of her daughter Susie in order to promote personal safety and personal security, particularly for women. It seems that a lot of people have been put off purchasing one of these personal telephones, not because of the initial cost, but because of the £25 a month rental. Well, that's now been slashed to £10. So Norman Lamont, kindly note, these are no longer yuppie toys. One of these could just save your life. Now, car phones, of course, are very much the rage. We got used to the idea of doing business on the move, but we've now gone one step further towards the office with wheels. You can now have your own fax machine. It'll cost you about £1,650 installed. It's also a photocopier. It's a neat installation. The only thing that worries me, imagine if someone sends you a really long fax. You could end up not being able to see out of the car.
Just under 2 years ago, the DVLA began their own Select Your Own registration scheme. Now, proof of its success is that we've spent £50 million buying them. Now, here's a classic example. What you basically get is a combination of 52 numbers to choose from and 3 letters, anything but apart from I, Q and Z. Or there's this one, nice Father's Day present perhaps, J40 Dad, never know. But of course, the real mega bucks goes for the classic collection. Though I'm not really quite sure whether I'd want one that on my car. Or what about 1 GB? I suppose it saves you on the sticker if you're going abroad. Now, this one, well, they don't know really how much this one's going to make. It's actually going for auction in Scotland quite soon. Suffice to say, though, there's another one, G1LLY, Gilly, went for £75,000.
This is a really good bit of kit. This is the very latest in-car entertainment. If you're in a traffic jam or you're rushing down the motorway in particular and you don't want to touch all the buttons and knobs, well, you don't have to fiddle anymore because you can actually talk to your little entertaining friend. There's a CD playing at the moment, but if I want to go over to the radio, Phoenix Tuner. My little friend Phoenix recognises my voice and immediately puts the radio on. Now, if I want to go over to the tape, I've just got to wait for Phoenix to sort of... Phoenix, tape, eject. Phoenix takes the commands and ejects the tape, and then all the traffic comes to a halt, and so you want Phoenix, coffee. Excellent. Isn't it clever? Steve, we've just plucked you from the crowd here at Motorfair. You've got the worried look of a long-distance commuter. What sort of driving do you do?
I'm afraid so. I commute 38 miles into work every day in thick traffic.
The dreaded M25?
I'm afraid it is, yes.
Yeah. What do you look for in a car when you know you're going to be involved in congestion?
Well, I quite like one of these, but I think most of all I'd like a really quiet car.
Surely there must be a lot of cars that meet your requirements.
There are a lot of cars to look at the show. I've had a look at the Peugeot 605, which goes a long way to what I'd like to have. There's the Honda Accord, but one car I wouldn't mind being in the traffic jam in is the Citroën XM.
Take a seat. So what's so special about this car, Steve?
It immediately feels comfortable when I sit in, Noel. The seat feels just right, the controls are nicely laid out, it's very pleasing inside. It has automatic transmission, which will make the town driving much easier. Seat adjustments, easy to hand. It's physically not too big a car, but has lots of the big car features. Leg room in the rear. It also has the self-leveling suspension system. It should give a very good ride indeed. Very quiet.
Nice touch with the audio controls on the steering wheel.
Very nice touch indeed. No fumbling around in the dark to find the volume controls. Just there, right in front of you.
I think you nearly smiled then. For a moment I thought you might look happy in a traffic jam in this car.
Well, it would make my driving an awful lot easier. Perhaps I might smile a little bit when I'm stuck in the traffic on the motorway.
There are some pretty unfamiliar names at Motorfair, cars from all over the world. Like this one, for example, the Kia Pride from Korea. It owes a lot in its design to Mazda, but this top-of-the-range 5-door version, the company feel, has very much moved on, and they see it as very much their own design now. Looking inside, well, I think the colour's quite clever. It's light grey, and that gives a feeling of space. The first thing I always do in a small car is I get into the rear seat, because quite often that can be very claustrophobic in a small car. And in fact, there's a remarkable amount of room. And the seat itself splits 50-50, which can be very useful. The boot, well, that's not a bad size either for such a small car. But I must admit, I do have reservations about just how solidly the car's built. This model costs £6,799. And in these environmentally conscious days, it's interesting to note that every Kia Pride has a catalytic converter. Even the 1.13 door version, which makes it the cheapest car on the market with this facility. Cars seem to turn up from everywhere these days, and here's the latest offering from South Africa. It's the Theo Penza, and it's derived from the Mazda 323. It's aimed as a competitor to the Seat and Hyundai range. And here's the Lantra. It may not sound terribly exciting, but it's priced well below similar-sized cars. The model range starting at under £10,000. It might even rival the good old Cavalier and the Sierra.
Okay, all right, Maurice, I've got that. So, the results of the mechanics survey, you've got down that the Golf, you say, is a dealer's car. Why?
Well, not a car. I looked at the VR6 engine, the new engine, feat of engineering, but definitely a dealer, because it's so difficult to get to anything. The alternator, very difficult to get to. Even the battery's got to have a cover to keep it cool, and the engine is very tight inside that unit.
Okay, no DIY there.
No.
Fiat Tipo, the 1.4.
Yes, that did impress me. I looked under the bonnet, lots of room, very easy to get to, very easy for accessing and servicing, but I still come back to the old headlight. You've got to buy a complete headlight instead of just a glass.
Yeah, okay, the Suzuki?
Well, yes, I looked at the Suzuki four-wheel drive unit. Very nice car, easy, nice to service, very nice for the working man to run around town.
Yeah, good. And of course the Ford, which we were looking at just now.
Well, yes.
Tell me about this.
The Ford. How can you down a Ford? A wonderful engine, beautifully to work on, brake, everything's simple to get to, buy the spare parts anywhere, and they're very, very cheap. Always get out of trouble.
And a final word, what do the mechanics think about the Japanese?
Well, they make a lovely car, a lovely engine, but they could improve upon their spare parts and their delivery service.
Right. Of course, one of the biggest Japanese names in the market is Honda, particularly well known because of their worldwide motor racing activities, and no doubt a big hit with lady buyers because of this very glamorous car. Tracy, is this the sort of car that you would like to be seen in?
Definitely. It's a superb sports car. It's beautifully built, beautifully designed, incredibly elegant. It's also been designed so you can drive it like a normal car to the shop. It's one of the few sports cars you don't actually need lessons in driving. So yes, I would love to be seen driving around in this.
That brings us on to the subject of the characters that you play. I mean, it's a Howard's Way, a very, well, not pushy lady, but someone who knows her own mind.
Very definitely.
That character would be attracted to what sort of cars, do you think?
I suspect British sports cars, you go for a Lotus, or other than that, maybe into areas like a Ferrari, or something like a Rolls Royce is obviously a wonderful status symbol. I'm not sure it's a lady's car.
Yes, without getting into a sex war, I mean, do you think that women need cars in quite the same way that men do? Is it an extension of their personalities?
I think women are more practical about choosing their cars. And I think maybe the last consideration, although just as important, is what the car looks like. I suspect men go for image more when you're getting into those high-class cars.
The big story here on the Jaguar stand, and seen for the first time in the UK, is Jaguar's restyled XJRS. Weighing in at just under £50,000, it's one of the fastest road-going Jaguars ever built. So, what do you get for your money? Well, a new environmentally friendly 6-litre V12 engine, which can produce a hefty 333 brake horsepower. Well, to you and me, that means it can accelerate from 0 to 60 in just a tad under 6 seconds. And on the racetrack, well, it can touch 160 miles an hour. Inside, well, it's everything you would expect from a car of this caliber, from the walnut dashboard to the electrically operated seats that memorize your driving position. How successful the XJRS will be in Britain's depressed luxury car market, well, only time will tell. But if a petrol consumption of 13 miles per gallon bothers you, then like me, I'm afraid you can't afford it. And here's another very nice car, probably the most expensive car on the show, the Bentley Continental R. The first uniquely styled Bentley since the 50s, capable of whisking its well-heeled occupants up to 145 miles an hour. Mind you, such elegance doesn't come cheap. It'll cost you a £20,000 deposit just to get on the waiting list. Oh, by the way, that's full for the next 2 years. They only make 300 cars a year. Still interested? Well, it'll cost you £175,000 to take this one home. This is the glorious Lamborghini Diablo, a 206 miles an hour adrenaline pump. And even at a hefty £157,000, I must say it's rather nice.
This is a man's world, but nothing without a woman.
After all, we started with a people carrier, and this is positively the last word.
I know, but what I want to know is why do I always end up sitting in the most uncomfortable seat?
Kiddies, please. This is a serious project. It's called Top Cat, and it's going to be used to promote Ordnance Survey maps. It's got a Jaguar V12 engine in the back. This is a canopy off a Tornado jet, and it was built by a civil servant in a lock-up garage in Southampton. But don't laugh, because the last car he came up with, he sold to the Sultan of Brunei, the world's richest man. Hey, do you fancy a test drive?
No!
Very good. From Motorfair, bye.